Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes.
Johnny Carson revealed the 9 Golden Age guests who were actually evil. For 30 years, Johnny Carson brought America's biggest stars into living rooms across the country. His warm smile and easy laugh made viewers feel like they were watching old friends catch up over coffee. But when the cameras stopped rolling and the audience went home, Carson's smile often disappeared. According to those closest to him, America's favorite host kept a mental blacklist of guests he considered truly terrible human beings. Johnny was the ultimate professional on camera, revealed a former Tonight Show producer who worked with Carson for over a decade. But the minute we cut to commercial, he would sometimes turn to Ed and whisper, "That person should never be near a camera or a child." In his final years, Carson became increasingly candid about the celebrities he'd secretly despised throughout his career. The stories he told close friends paint a disturbing picture of beloved icons who were monsters behind their carefully crafted public images. Most shocking were Carson's revelations about one legendary actress who appeared sweet and vulnerable on his couch, but backstage had verbally assaulted a young production assistant so viciously that security had to intervene, and the beloved male star who Carson caught doing something so disturbing in his dressing room that the host nearly called the police. These weren't just difficult personalities or demanding stars. According to Carson, these were genuinely dark people hiding behind fame and talent, predators, abusers, and manipulators who the industry protected for decades. But first, we need to understand why the first name on Carson's list earned his most intense dislike, and the private backstage confrontation no one has ever revealed until now.
Well, first of all, I'm stage struck, and I think they all know that. Secondly, I try to get a film that has audience identification.
Joan Crawford, the Hollywood queen with ice in her veins. When Joan Crawford appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970, viewers saw the gracious Hollywood legend they'd admired for decades. With her perfect posture, immaculate appearance, and practiced charm, Crawford embodied old Hollywood glamour. But according to multiple Tonight Show staff members, Crawford's off-camera behavior revealed a very different person. She was one of the coldest people I've ever interviewed, Carson reportedly told his biographer years later. Like talking to a beautiful statue with nothing inside, Crawford's appearance began causing problems before she even arrived at the studio. Her demands included specific lighting requirements so detailed that the show's technical director still had the 4-page memo in his files decades later. Everything had to be precise, recalled a former producer. The angle of her chair, the height of Johnny's desk, even the temperature of the studio. Exactly 67 degrees, not 66, not 68. When Crawford finally arrived, 3 hours before taping, she brought her own makeup team, despite the show having award-winning makeup artists on staff. But what truly revealed Crawford's character was how differently she treated people based on their importance. She practically curtsied to Johnny, said a stagehand who was present that day, but when a young production assistant accidentally entered her dressing room with water she had requested, Crawford exploded. According to multiple witnesses, Crawford launched into a tirade so vicious that staff members in the hallway froze in shock. She allegedly called the assistant, a 20-year-old woman just starting in the industry, a brainless little tramp, and suggested she find work at a brothel where incompetence might be an asset. The young woman fled in tears, and Crawford demanded she be fired. Carson's producer refused, creating tension that lasted throughout the taping. But the most disturbing aspect of Crawford's appearance wasn't just her treatment of staff, it was the calculating way she transformed the moment cameras turned on. She was like a machine pretending to be a woman, one producer recalled. She had rehearsed every answer, every laugh, every spontaneous moment. Nothing was real. During commercial breaks, Crawford would immediately drop her smile and sit in stone-faced silence, not speaking to anyone, then instantly reanimate when the red light came back on. Carson, known for his ability to make guests comfortable, struggled to find any authentic connection with Crawford. After the show, he reportedly told Ed McMahon, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Years later, when Christina Crawford's memoir Mommy Dearest revealed Joan's alleged abuse of her adopted children, Carson wasn't surprised. According to close friends, he simply nodded and said, "I saw who she really was in those few hours. I believe every word." But if Crawford's cold calculation unnerved Carson, his next nemesis represented something he found even more disturbing: raw power used to intimidate and threaten.
I can answer that by telling you that in those lovely moments, I play Daphnis and Chloe,
Frank Sinatra, the charming bully Carson couldn't stand. On screen, Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson appeared to share a cordial, even friendly relationship. The legendary singer would joke, tell stories, and occasionally perform, while Carson played the respectful host. Behind the scenes, however, Carson reportedly harbored a deep dislike for Sinatra, not for his talent, which Carson respected, but for how Old Blue Eyes treated people when he thought no one important was watching. If he didn't sing, he'd be a mob enforcer, Carson once told a friend, according to multiple biographies, and sometimes I think he was both. Sinatra's appearances on The Tonight Show were notorious among crew members for the tension they created. According to longtime staff, Sinatra would arrive with an entourage of up to 8 men who were described as not show business types, more like guys you wouldn't want to meet in an alley. These men would spread through the studio watching staff and creating an atmosphere one cameraman described as like being under surveillance. But what truly disturbed Carson was witnessing how Sinatra treated people he deemed beneath him. During one appearance in the early 1970s, a floor manager made the mistake of giving Sinatra the standard 3 minutes warning before his segment. According to several witnesses, Sinatra grabbed the man by his tie and pulled him close, saying, "Nobody tells me when I've got 3 minutes. I'll go on when I'm ready." The floor manager, a Korean War veteran in his 50s, was visibly shaken afterward. When Carson saw this interaction from his office monitor, he nearly canceled the segment. Only the producer's reminder of the ratings Sinatra would bring convinced him to continue. Another source of tension was Sinatra's reliability, or lack thereof. He allegedly canceled appearances last minute multiple times, including once just 2 hours before taping when he was already in the building but decided he wasn't in the mood. The most revealing moment came during a commercial break when Sinatra made a disparaging comment about a female staff member's appearance, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Carson, breaking his usual professional detachment, coldly responded, "We don't talk about my staff that way here." The tension was palpable, with Sinatra visibly surprised that anyone, even Johnny Carson, would challenge him. When the cameras returned, both men maintained their professional facades, but crew members noticed Carson's questions became notably shorter and less engaged. After that appearance, Carson reportedly told his producer, "I don't care what his ratings are, limit him to once a year, maximum." What makes this particularly significant is that Carson rarely involved himself in booking decisions and almost never banned guests outright. For him to restrict Sinatra's appearances spoke volumes about his personal distaste for the singer's behavior. While Sinatra represented the bullying side of celebrity power, Carson's next problematic guest demonstrated a different kind of difficult, the overwhelming ego that recognized no boundaries or formats.
Now, the argument against what I'm saying is that the world is full. All the best young directors are soaked.
Orson Welles, the genius who thought rules were beneath him. Orson Welles appeared on The Tonight Show multiple times during the Carson era, always generating memorable television with his booming voice, larger-than-life presence, and remarkable stories from his storied career. Viewers at home saw a charming, brilliant raconteur. Carson and his staff saw something else, a man whose ego had grown so enormous that he believed normal rules of television simply didn't apply to him. "Never again," Carson reportedly said after one particularly difficult Welles appearance. "That guy thinks he's still running Rome." The problems typically began before Welles even arrived at the studio. According to Tonight Show writers, Welles routinely dismissed any prepared questions or topics Carson's team had developed. "He told us our questions were pedestrian and obvious," one former writer recalled. He literally crossed them all out and handed back an empty page. This put Carson in the uncomfortable position of having to interview one of cinema's most significant figures with no preparation or framework, a particular challenge given Welles's tendency to launch into lengthy, meandering stories that were difficult to edit for time. During one appearance in the mid-1970s, Welles was scheduled for a 7-minute segment. He stayed on the couch for nearly 25 minutes, ignoring multiple subtle cues from Carson that it was time to wrap up. Johnny had a series of signals he would give guests when time was running short, a director explained. Welles saw them all and just kept talking. We had to bump 2 other guests entirely. Welles's behavior towards staff was equally dismissive. He reportedly refused to speak directly to production assistants, instead addressing them in the third person, even when they were standing right beside him. "Tell the girl I need more water," or "ask the boy to adjust the light." What particularly irritated Carson, according to those who knew him well, was Welles's habit of treating the Tonight Show as if it were his own personal platform rather than Carson's program. Orson would bring props, change topics without warning, and even attempt to direct camera shots from his seat, a former producer explained. "He once actually stood up and tried to tell our camera operators which angles to use." Johnny was livid. After one particularly challenging appearance, Carson reportedly told Ed McMahon, "Genius doesn't excuse everything. Being brilliant doesn't give you the right to hijack someone else's show." Carson, himself a perfectionist about television production, found Wells's disregard for the medium's constraints especially galling. Though he maintained public respect for Wells's immense contributions to film, privately he began to view him as a cautionary tale of what happens when talent is eclipsed by ego. While Wells represented the challenge of containing an oversized personality, Carson's next difficult guest brought a different problem: unpredictable behavior that could quickly turn hostile.
Spelled out in light bulbs, I mean. Besides something called a temperament, which consists most...
Bette Davis, Hollywood's queen of verbal violence. When Bette Davis appeared on The Tonight Show, audiences saw the legendary actress at her most engaging, telling witty stories in her distinctive voice, elegant even in her later years, and filled with fascinating Hollywood history. What they didn't see were the moments before and after the red light came on, when Davis reportedly revealed a personality so abrasive that even the unflappable Carson was taken aback. She doesn't need a stage, she needs a courtroom, Carson allegedly told Ed McMahon after one particularly difficult appearance. No one should have to be cross-examined by Bette Davis without a lawyer present. Davis' first offense, according to multiple Tonight Show staff accounts, was her treatment of other guests. When booked on episodes with multiple celebrities, Davis would often interrupt or talk over them, especially if they were younger performers or women. She would physically turn her back on other guests on the couch, a former talent coordinator recalled. If someone else was telling a story that got laughs, you could see her seething, planning how to regain control. Behind the scenes, Davis's behavior was even more problematic. She reportedly demanded whiskey in her dressing room before appearances, not unusual for guests of her era, but her alcohol consumption sometimes led to inappropriate comments and behavior. According to female staff members who worked on the show in the 1970s, Davis regularly used sexist and racist language that shocked even by the standards of that time. One makeup artist recalled Davis refusing her services, asking instead for someone whose hands don't shake like they're coming off a 3-day drunk. Carson, who generally avoided confrontation, made an exception for Davis when she began berating a cue card holder for being too slow during a rehearsal. Johnny actually stepped in, remembered a production assistant who witnessed the incident. He very quietly told her, "Miss Davis, on this show, we speak to everyone with respect or we don't speak at all." She was stunned, probably not used to being challenged, but she backed down. What made Davis particularly difficult for Carson was the contrast between her undeniable talent and her treatment of others. Unlike some difficult guests who could be dismissed as talentless, Davis was a genuine legend whose work Carson admired. After her final appearance on the show in the early 1980s, Carson reportedly told his producer, "That's the last time. Life's too short to spend it being verbally flogged by Bette Davis, no matter how many Oscars she has." While Davis at least directed her barbs at adults who could defend themselves, Carson's next problematic guest brought a different kind of discomfort: behavior toward young women that crossed professional boundaries.
Some too? Oh, sure. I'm
Makes you strong and tall.
Mickey Rooney, the aging child star with wandering hands. Mickey Rooney was Hollywood royalty, the #1 box office star from 1939 to 1941, and a living connection to the industry's golden age. His appearances on The Tonight Show should have been nostalgic celebrations of an illustrious career. Instead, according to multiple staff accounts, Rooney's visits became notorious for his inappropriate behavior, chaotic energy, and occasional intoxication. He thinks being short gives him license to be a pervert, Carson reportedly told his producer after one particularly problematic appearance in the mid-1970s. Rooney, then in his mid-50s, developed a reputation among female staff members for unwanted touching, suggestive comments, and ignoring professional boundaries. According to multiple accounts, young production assistants would ask to be reassigned when they learned Rooney was booked. He would grab your hand when you brought him water, try to pull you closer, ask if you were married, recalled a former assistant who worked on the show in the late 1970s. If you tried to leave, he'd hold onto your wrist just a little too long. Even more concerning was Rooney's apparent inability to recognize when he'd had too much to drink. According to Tonight Show employees, he appeared visibly intoxicated during at least 3 separate appearances, slurring words and losing his train of thought mid-sentence. During one infamous segment in 1977, Rooney began telling an anecdote about Judy Garland that quickly became inappropriate, forcing Carson to cut him off and pivot to a different topic. During the commercial break, Carson reportedly asked his producer, "Is he drunk, or is this just who he is now?" What made Rooney particularly difficult for Carson was the generational gap in understanding what constituted appropriate behavior. Born in 1920, Rooney came from an era of Hollywood where certain conduct toward women was commonplace if not condoned. Johnny was no prude, but he had clear lines about professional conduct, explained a director who worked on the show for many years. Rooney seemed genuinely confused when called out on his behavior, like he didn't understand why it was a problem. After one appearance where Rooney made repeated comments about a young actress also appearing on that night's show, Carson took the unusual step of apologizing to her personally after the taping. "I've never seen Johnny so embarrassed by a guest's behavior," the director recalled. He told her, "That's not how professionals act on my show, and it won't happen again." True to his word, Rooney's appearances became less frequent in the late 1970s and early 1980s, with Carson reportedly insisting on daytime pre-tapings rather than live evening broadcasts when Rooney was booked. While Rooney's behavior created uncomfortable situations, Carson's next challenging guest brought a different kind of difficulty, demands so extensive and unreasonable they became legendary among the staff.
I don't see, my last marriage was 1 day. And I didn't think it will last that long.
Zsa Gabor, the diva who drove Carson to despair. With her glamorous appearance, distinctive accent, and flirtatious personality, Zsa Gabor was a Tonight Show favorite who appeared dozens of times during Carson's tenure. Viewers saw a charming, over-the-top personality who played up her Hungarian background and many marriages for laughs. Behind the scenes, according to numerous staff accounts, Gabor was one of the most demanding, difficult guests in the show's history. "I'd rather interview a cat," Carson reportedly quipped after a particularly exhausting Gabor appearance. At least the cat wouldn't need 3 assistants and special lighting. Gabor's demands began long before she arrived at the studio. According to former Tonight Show employees, her standard requirements included a specific temperature in her dressing room, 74 degrees, fresh flowers, orchids only, no carnations, a bottle of Perrier water with exactly 3 ice cubes, her own lighting technician flown in at the show's expense, no female guests who were younger than 40 booked on the same episode. Her writer read like a parody of Celebrity Demands, recalled a former talent coordinator. "We thought it was a joke the first time we got it." When these requirements weren't met exactly, Gabor reportedly would refuse to leave her dressing room until the situation was rectified, often delaying taping and throwing off the entire show's schedule. One of the most infamous incidents occurred when Gabor arrived for a taping and discovered the makeup department didn't have her preferred brand of foundation. According to multiple witnesses, she got into a shouting match with the head makeup artist, demanding someone be sent to Beverly Hills immediately to purchase the correct product. Johnny actually had to intervene, a former producer remembered. He called her directly and said something like, Zsa, honey, you look beautiful already and we have a show to do. Let's save the cosmetics emergency for another day." What particularly irked Carson about Gabor's behavior was how it affected the overall production. Other guests would be kept waiting, crew members would have to work overtime, and the show's carefully planned schedule would be thrown into chaos. After one appearance where Gabor arrived 40 minutes late and then complained about her introduction, Carson reportedly told his executive producer, "Next time she wants to be on, tell her we've renamed the show The Tonight Show, starring Zsa Gabor, and I'll be happy to be her sidekick." Despite these frustrations, Gabor continued to appear on the show throughout Carson's tenure, a testament to her undeniable entertainment value when the cameras were actually rolling. While Gabor's diva demands created logistical headaches, Carson's next challenging guest brought a different kind of discomfort, unpredictable behavior that could quickly turn a lighthearted interview into an uncomfortable confrontation.
Cow. The obnoxious mama.
Shelley Winters, the unpredictable powder keg. Shelley Winters was a 2-time Oscar winner with a career spanning decades, from glamorous roles in her youth to character parts in her later years. On paper, she should have been an ideal Tonight Show guest, experienced, accomplished, and full of Hollywood stories. In reality, according to those who worked on the show, Winters was one of Carson's most unpredictable and volatile guests. Shelley doesn't talk, she detonates, Carson reportedly said after one particularly explosive appearance. Winters became infamous among the show's staff for her inability or unwillingness to adapt to the light, entertainment-focused format of late-night television. Rather than sharing amusing anecdotes or promoting current projects, she would often launch into intense political diatribes or deeply personal revelations that left Carson visibly uncomfortable. During one appearance in the mid-1970s, what began as a simple question about a recent film quickly evolved into Winters Winters delivering a 5-minute, uninterrupted monologue about government corruption, leaving Carson struggling to find a way to lightheartedly transition to a commercial. Johnny was a master of controlling conversations, but with Shelley, it was like trying to steer a tornado, recalled a former director. Once she got going, all he could do was wait for her to run out of steam. Winters' unpredictability wasn't limited to her conversational topics. She became known for physical outbursts as well. In one infamous incident on a British talk show, she threw a glass of whiskey in fellow guest Oliver Reed's face after he made sexist comments. This reputation for volatility made Tonight Show staff nervous whenever she was booked. "We would actually remove certain items from the set when we knew she was coming," admitted a former stage manager. Anything that could be thrown or knocked over would mysteriously disappear before her segments. Despite these challenges, what distinguished Winters from some of Carson's other difficult guests was that her behavior seemed to stem from genuine passion rather than malice or ego. She cared deeply about political and social issues and saw every public appearance as an opportunity to address them, regardless of the venue's appropriateness. Carson, while visibly uncomfortable during her more intense moments, maintained a certain respect for Winters' authenticity. After one particularly fiery appearance where she criticized the Vietnam War, Carson reportedly told his producer, "I may not want to vacation with her, but at least she means every word she says." Nevertheless, Winters' appearances became less frequent in the later years of Carson's tenure, with the host preferring guests whose conversational style complemented rather than challenged the show's format. While Winters' passionate unpredictability created on-air challenges, Carson's next difficult guest represented something he found personally distasteful: extreme political views that targeted vulnerable communities.
I like big muscles and red corpuscle. I like a beautiful...
Jane Russell, the star whose politics Carson couldn't stomach. Jane Russell was one of Hollywood's most iconic sex symbols of the 1940s and 50s, known for films like The Outlaw and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. With her striking beauty and significant place in film history, she seemed like a natural recurring guest for The Tonight Show. Yet after a few appearances in the early 1970s, Russell rarely returned to Carson's couch, a decision that, according to show insiders, stemmed from Carson's discomfort with her increasingly extreme political views and reported treatment of LGBTQ+ staff members. Carson, while personally a moderate Republican for much of his life, maintained a strict policy of keeping The Tonight Show relatively neutral on divisive political issues. Russell, however, reportedly used backstage interactions to express hardline conservative views that Carson found troubling. Johnny could handle guests having different political opinions, explained a former producer. What bothered him was when those opinions turned into personal attacks on staff members or other guests. According to several accounts, Russell became notorious for making disparaging comments about LGBTQ+ individuals working on the show. During one appearance in the early 1970s, she allegedly refused to allow a gay makeup artist to touch her face, demanding a replacement. Even more concerning to Carson was a reported incident involving Rock Hudson. According to a talent coordinator who worked on the show, Russell refused to be booked on the same episode as Hudson, making derogatory comments about his sexuality, which, though not publicly acknowledged at the time, was known within Hollywood circles. Johnny had many friends in the gay community, including several staff members. The talent coordinator recalled, he was ahead of his time in not tolerating that kind of discrimination on his show. Carson's final breaking point with Russell allegedly came during a 1973 appearance when she made dismissive comments about civil rights legislation during a commercial break. Though not picked up on broadcast microphones, her remarks were overheard by several crew members and reportedly reached Carson's ears. After that appearance, Russell was noticeably absent from The Tonight Show's guest roster for the remainder of Carson's tenure, one of the few clear cases where Carson appears to have personally vetoed future bookings. What made this situation particularly notable was Carson's general reluctance to ban guests outright, especially those with Russell's level of star power and historical significance to Hollywood. For him to take such a definitive stance spoke volumes about how strongly he objected to her behavior. While Russell's politics and treatment of staff created a permanent rift with Carson, his final and perhaps most intense dislike was reserved for a comedian whose public persona and private behavior were reportedly worlds apart.
I've never asked you this, but I'm asking you now simply, purely, hold it!
Jerry Lewis, the comedian Carson called truly hateful. Jerry Lewis was one of America's most successful entertainers, a groundbreaking comedian, actor, director, and humanitarian known for his annual telethons benefiting muscular dystrophy research. His manic energy and physical comedy had made him a global star. Behind the scenes, according to numerous Tonight Show staff accounts, Lewis was also one of the most difficult, demeaning celebrities in Hollywood, a reputation that earned him a special place on Carson's personal blacklist. He's what happens when ego outruns talent, Carson reportedly told a colleague after a particularly troublesome Lewis appearance in the mid-1970s. Unlike some difficult guests who saved their worst behavior for underlings, Lewis reportedly made no secret of his disdain for Carson himself. During one infamous appearance, Lewis repeatedly talked over Carson, hijacked questions intended for other guests, and at one point actually reached over and adjusted Carson's tie without permission, a move that visibly annoyed the normally unflappable host. Johnny hated people touching him without permission, a former producer explained. It was a well-known rule. You don't touch Johnny unless he initiates it. Lewis knew this and did it anyway as a power move. Lewis's treatment of crew members was allegedly even worse. According to several accounts, he would refuse to learn staffers' names, referring to them as "Hey you" or by their function, camera guy, makeup, girl, regardless of their experience or seniority. One particularly disturbing incident occurred when a camera operator reportedly coughed quietly during Lewis's rehearsal. According to multiple witnesses, Lewis stopped everything and launched into a tirade, screaming that the cameraman was a professional who breathes like an amateur and demanding he be removed from the studio. Jerry screamed at a camera op for breathing loudly, confirmed a floor manager who was present. Not talking, breathing. The poor guy had allergies. What Carson found most objectionable about Lewis was the contrast between his public persona as a tireless champion for children and his private behavior toward people who couldn't benefit his career. The Jekyll and Hyde routine made Johnny's skin crawl, recalled a producer who worked closely with Carson. He'd watch Jerry cry on his telethon about loving children, then come to our show and treat people like they were subhuman. After Lewis's final appearance on The Tonight Show in the early 1980s, Carson reportedly told his executive producer simply, "Never again." Though Carson rarely banned guests outright, Lewis joined the small group of celebrities who were effectively blacklisted from the show during its final decade. Years later, when asked about Lewis at a private dinner, Carson reportedly said something that shocked those present with its uncharacteristic harshness. "In a town full of phonies, he stands out as truly hateful, and that takes some doing." What Carson's blacklist reveals about Hollywood's true nature. Johnny Carson's private feelings about these 9 difficult guests, Joan Crawford, Frank Sinatra, Orson Welles, Betty Davis, Mickey Rooney, Zaza Gabor, Shelley Winters, Jane Russell, and Jerry Lewis, offer a rare, unfiltered glimpse into Hollywood's reality behind the carefully maintained facade of glamour and charm. "Johnny saw everything," explained a longtime Tonight Show producer. "For 30 years, every major star had to go through him to reach the American public. He knew who was genuine and who was faking it." What makes Carson's assessments particularly valuable is that he had no reason to exaggerate or invent negative stories. Unlike tabloid journalists or disgruntled employees with axes to grind, Carson was at the absolute pinnacle of the entertainment industry. He had nothing to gain by criticizing these celebrities and everything to lose if his honesty damaged relationships with potential guests. "Johnny wasn't looking to make enemies," noted his former producer. "Just the opposite. He wanted every interview to go smoothly. When he disliked someone, it was because they had made it impossible not to." Carson's unique position, part gatekeeper, part confessor to the stars, gave him an unparalleled perspective on celebrity culture. For 3 decades, stars revealed sides of themselves on his couch that they showed nowhere else, creating a bond of trust that made Carson's private judgments all the more significant. Perhaps most revealing is how Carson distinguished between guests who were merely difficult and those he considered truly problematic. He tolerated eccentricity, nervousness, even moderate ego. Understanding these came with the territory of fame. What he couldn't abide was cruelty, especially toward those with less power. "Johnny had a simple test," recalled his longtime director. "How did they treat the pages, the assistants, the guys working the cameras? That told him everything he needed to know about someone's character." In the years since Carson's death in 2005, many of his private opinions have been validated by broader revelations about these celebrities. Christina Crawford's allegations about her mother Joan, reports about Sinatra's connections to organized crime, and stories of Mickey Rooney's inappropriate behavior have all been corroborated by multiple sources. This suggests Carson wasn't just being judgmental, he was recognizing genuine character flaws that Hollywood Hollywood's publicity machine worked overtime to conceal from the public. The most sobering aspect of Carson's blacklist is how effectively the studio system protected these celebrities despite their behavior being known to industry insiders. Long before social media and cancel culture, stars could maintain pristine public images while behaving abominably in private, secure in the knowledge that the studios, networks, and publications all had vested interests in maintaining their marketability. Today, one cell phone video could end a career, observed a former Tonight Show writer. Back then, someone could throw a chair at an assistant, and as long as they sold tickets, the story would never leave the building. As we look back on Hollywood's golden age with nostalgia, Carson's unvarnished assessments serve as a valuable reminder that our cultural icons have always been fallible, complicated human beings, sometimes inspiring, sometimes disappointing, and occasionally truly disturbing behind their carefully crafted public personas. Johnny used to say, "The camera doesn't just add 10 pounds, it adds a layer of fiction," recalled his longtime producer. His greatest skill wasn't just interviewing people, it was seeing through that fiction to the truth underneath. Thank you for watching this exploration of Johnny Carson's most difficult guests. If you found this journey into television's golden age revealing, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into entertainment history. And if these